Believe me, I am as tired of the Adobe monopoly as the next guy. In fact, I've been testing Lightroom alternatives for like a decade now. And for the past few years, I've always done a DXO Photo Lab review because when they come out, all the influencers are dropping these reviews saying this year it's gonna kill Lightroom. I mean, heck, look at these headlines. They're hardcore and they all have just about the same theme. Interestingly enough, that's the same theme that all the reviews had last year, partnerships. In fact, DXO has offered to make a partnership with me as well, and I declined. So I'm here to say that this review is a 100% real review, and we're going to compare Lightroom to DXO Photo Lab. And also, I always compare Lightroom to Capture One and other apps, so I'll throw in a little bit of those antidotes along the way. I say we pop into DXO Photo Lab and get to the meat of this. Now, the first thing I'm greeted with is they want me to buy Film Pack. Now, I can hide this, so that's fine, but we're going to talk about pricing of DXO versus Lightroom in a minute, because while you can buy DXO outright, and I know we're all sick of subscriptions, Lightroom is still cheaper. You know, we have the library here in DXO, and this is pretty cool because you don't actually have to import. You can just kind of click these folders and it loads right up. Now, as cool as that is, and it's pretty fast, there is a little bit of delay. So is this a good thing or a bad? It is simpler, but it's also having to populate all these things. Now, in Lightroom, we're going to work here in Lightroom Classic, but if you're using the Lightroom Cloud version or even the mobile version, the features you get are pretty much the same, which I hate to say it, is a huge thing for Adobe over Capture One as well, as we talk about in other reviews, is that Lightroom has this system that interacts across all platforms really well. In Lightroom, I can go through and click these different groups and sets, and they load really snappy. That is, once the previews are rendered. Now, Lightroom certainly has a tendency to bog down in certain areas, which we talk about more in other videos, but the advantage of having a catalog is you have exact control over how all these previews are rendered, and then things load really fast. But the advantage in DXO is that I can pretty much just browse to anything, except, well, kind of not. Because unlike Lightroom, where I can synchronize entire new folders and it'll show the subfolders, it appears that I still cannot drill down into a folder. That is to say, if I select the parent folder, yeah, it's cool that I don't have to import these, but I still have to dig down into the exact folder I want. If you go to Lightroom, you can see that very easily, if I click on a parent folder, it will show me everything that's within that folder, not an empty folder. And then if I want to go down inside that folder, I can click whatever folder I want. And if I want to synchronize the folder, because Lightroom has a catalog and you do have to update that catalog, it's still very easy because I can scan for everything, including in the subfolders. But it appears that in DXO, we still have none of that. How about projects? Okay, let's go to my test project here because I got a bunch of the test photos for today. It loads right up, but my gosh, is this it? Let's see if we can make this a little bigger and get a little better interface. There's no collections. There's no smart collections. There's nothing. I can't even resort images still. Are you kidding me, DXO? Come on. Let's say that smart collections are a luxury and we can live without them. Here's my project, which is the same as a collection, and I can drag folders into it. So I can go up here. Man, every time I click this folder, I have to wait for all this stuff to render and load. Doesn't it like... So I can drag stuff into my project or my collection, and there it is, but I can't reorder it. Whereas in Lightroom, if I go to my collection, I can drag things around wherever I want them, which honestly, these might seem like small things, but these are a big deal when you're trying to do workflows. You know, when I look at this stuff and I look at the videos where people are Schill tubing the hardest for this, and it's these photographers, and I'm watching these and I'm like, there's no way that they've switched to this. There's no way that professional photographers are switching to this, that are actively working, because you lose too many essential features. Now, again, let's give DXO the benefit of the doubt and come back and actually look at its good points. Okay, let's choose a photo here and go to Customize, which is Develop module. And we do have a lot of tools. We have a lot of stuff here that we can work with. And in fact, in the past, I've even experimented with making some basic presets that are along the line of like PowerFlow, my PowerFlow presets that I make for Lightroom and Capture One. And you can see that we can apply tools, you can save presets. This is good. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're using mine or if you're using my Filmist presets or something like that. Link in the description for the free pack of my Filmist presets if you want. There's your sponsorship for this video. But seriously, we have those here, which is good. I mean, DxO is on the right track. I can make a new preset. The downside of this is I can't save any settings. I can't define any parameters of that preset. Again, these details, it's like actions in Photoshop. And then these apps that want to replace Photoshop, they have a terrible scripting system that don't allow professionals to do real advanced things and workflows. It's the same with presets. It's great that we have presets in DxO, but in Lightroom and in Capture One, you can make very customized tools, whether you're using others or making your own, and that makes all the difference in the quality of your edits as well as the speed of your edits. Now, we do have AI selection, so let's turn on local adjustments, and it's a little confusing at first because you have these AI masks here, and you can kind of click, and it's using like the U point that used to be with the Nik software, which is now DxO as well. Even though it looks great in a demo, this isn't the most important. The most important is subject, background, things like that. Now, if you look here, you actually have to go here, and you go up to the top here, and there's a secondary panel. And here I can select, for example, subject. Okay, so let's select subject. AI mask could not find, there's obviously a subject in this, guys. Come on. AI mask could not find anything matching your selection. Internal error, it says. Okay, let's try it again. See if we can, let's try background. Now it's just flashing this internal error. Okay, so now it doesn't even, now I can't even use this. Internal error correction failed. Unfortunately, looking this up, there's a whole bunch of comments talking about how they're getting this error and it's not working for them. So the main feature apparently is non-functional at this point. Okay, stop the presses. I took a break, did a ton of research. So I went to the DxO site and they have some information saying you need to downgrade your driver. I had to go to the NVIDIA site and look for my specific graphics card driver and then download a driver that was like from March. So like 6 months old, the 270 series drivers that they were talking about here. They said, hey, you need to install the old stable driver. Now, this is false. The stable driver is what I had installed. What's unstable is DxO. I don't know if this will cause problems with other things. This is certainly not a driver I want to stay with. Hopefully DxO will be on this and get their product stable with current drivers. But in the meantime, I did get masks to work. Okay, so now here we are, and I can turn on local adjustments, and as always, I can select like individual objects, which can be kind of cool, but let's focus on something like subject masks. So we're going to run the mask. Now, it did it pretty quick because I had ran this mask before, and apparently it's kind of cached in there. Originally, it took probably a little longer than a Lightroom mask would normally take with a subject, but we do have a mask. Let's see. What I like to do with these masks is adjust exposure to see just how accurate. And you can see that it's not bad, but it's really bleeding over. Okay, let's look at the same image in Lightroom and let's do a subject mask. Okay, and let's do that same kind of exposure test and see, okay, there's no bleed over. We're not like selecting part of the background. It's a pretty clear, and Lightroom masks are notoriously good for this. Capture One masks are pretty good. They've had, okay, let's go back to this one we were having problems with earlier, and let's go up here like we talked about and select subject. Okay, it's not bad, but there's definitely some bleed over on this one as well. Again, I'm not doing an edit that I would actually do here. I'm just doing that exposure setting so we can kind of see how it's selecting the mask. Let's go back to that same portrait in Lightroom and let it select the mask. If you look around the edges, I think there might be a little less bleed in Lightroom, but the mask isn't perfect in Lightroom. This is fairly difficult because of the dark background of this burned out tree. So you can see it's not perfectly selecting the hair. Overall, I would say the AR masks are pretty functional once you get them working. Are Lightroom's better? Yes. I would say they're more precise. These masks can be a great feature in DxO, but I'm definitely noticing some edge bleeds and stuff like that Lightroom is able to do a little better. Now, one more thing we probably should touch on in the AI masks is that you kind of have these U-point masks where you can select objects. And I think these are actually pretty cool. Or we could, for example, select the dress and change the hue of the clothing. Now, if we look in Capture One, it actually does have a very similar feature. So this isn't a new feature, but it's good to see it in DXO Photo Lab. And Lightroom doesn't have this. Now, if we look at the same scenario in Lightroom, while we don't exactly have these point masks, Lightroom does have a lot of mask options built in. So we could, for example, create a clothing mask. and effectively do the same thing. Now, what I do like about Lightroom is because these are predefined masks, they can all be saved into a speed mask. So while the point selection masks are cool, being able to save the mask into a speed mask to then be applied in a workflow across many images in the real world is something that I would use and do use. Let's continue looking at other features. Now, even though I don't love how they've implemented presets, you can make presets and you can run them. The develop module I find is pretty good. If you come in here in general in terms of like, you have your highlights and you have your shadows. The interface design I find is a little primitive, but it might just be that I'm used to Lightroom and Capture One because I'm extremely experienced in both of those. You have tone curve, RGB tone curves, all that kind of stuff. So let's look for some of the things that were lacking last time, in particular like split toning. And no, there's still no split toning, which is absolutely, I have sepia, that's all I can do. Let's turn on toning. I have no split toning. I don't want sepia. There's no split toning. There's no split toning because they actually want you to pay more than the $200 and something we've paid for this. They want you to get the film pack as well. Now, I've talked about this before, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm the maker of Filmus presets, which are really, really good film tools. But regardless of whether you like Film Pack, $239. Now, it's not a subscription. This is great. We love this, right? And then if you're upgrading, it's $119. So let's calculate the cost because they come out with a new version like every year. So if you say $239 plus $119 is $358 divided by 2 years, 24 months, $14.91. $15 a month is about what this is going to cost you. Now, I know we love to complain about Adobe and them raising prices, but the Lightroom with a terabyte of storage is $12 a month. So Lightroom is still cheaper, and you can still get Lightroom and Photoshop for $20 a month. And this is a huge mistake people make. And I just did a video on this on the channel where they think if I get a great raw editor, I don't need Photoshop. Capture One, Photo Lab, Lightroom, none of these replace Photoshop or an equivalent of it, which that's a whole nother topic. But you need a pixel level editor for your best photos. Now, you can go and get an old CS6 version of Photoshop and then you don't pay a subscription. And in fact, when I make actions and stuff like the new Alchemist pack I just made, I still develop those for CS6 for people that are like, no, I don't want that subscription because I get it. And Capture One is even more expensive. I mean, the Capture One Pro is $17 if you pay a year in advance and $26 if you pay monthly. So Capture One is more expensive than both Lightroom and DXO Photo Lab. All right, let's come back though and look some more at what we can do. So we don't have tools like split toning. And look, in Lightroom now, it's now called color grading. And in Capture One as well, we have this 3 color wheel split toning color grading mode. And it's really good in both Lightroom and in Capture One. This again is basic functionality. At this point, I don't know what you guys are doing, but okay, we still do have a lot of tools and we haven't come yet to noise reduction because DxO is famous for their lens corrections and particularly these days, their noise correction, which as I've showed you guys in a lot of videos, we get a little obsessed with how much we need to reduce noise. Graying is not a bad thing, but we're going to look at that in comparison to Lightroom's noise reduction as well. Okay, but first we need to do the torture test. Let's take this image, which I've used in this review for like 3 years now, to see how it handles shadow and highlights in extreme situations. So I'm going to do something simple into this, like go into PowerFlow 8 and put on something like Super Universal HDR. Okay, and let's pull the highlights back a little more. Let's darken it just a little bit more. Let's let the saturate. Let's do a few manual adjustments. And you can see that we're shooting right into this setting sun, and you can kind of see how Lightroom handles that extreme overexposure and just how it's balancing things out. All right, let's go into Photo Lab. Here we have the same image. Now, just to show that, yes, we can use presets, I'm going to apply my version of this preset that I made in Photo Lab. The shadow recovery is weird on this, okay, because it tends to be really muddy. Like, it really does weird stuff. But you also have a mid-tone slider, so you can, if you know what you're doing and take some time, you can get good dynamic range to a degree out of this. Here's what's happening here, though. Look at this. This is what I mentioned in last year's review, and I think the year before, where not just dynamic range. You know where this is coming from? Look at this. It's the HSL. Again, a basic functionality. Using things like drop color, like, you know, moving the greens, darkening the greens, and the oranges. Let's lighten up the oranges. So if I want to lighten up, look what's happening. What is it doing? I don't even understand, like, what on earth is going on here. And then if I darken the greens, like you normally would, In a lot of situations, you darken the greens a little bit. Look at these artifacts that it's introducing literally all over, like along the top here. There's like these weird, let's go to an extreme just so you can see it a little better. Like you can see that it's adding just these like green bits, and the orange is doing the same thing. I can't function with this. This is not HSL. What is it doing? If I'm in Lightroom or Capture One, by the way, and I go in and I do things like go to luminance and turn up my oranges and darken my greens, there's absolutely none of this weirdness. Like I have exact control. If I go up or down, you can see it's doing so very cleanly. And so like, look at the details here and how it's handling this. Now at this point in Lightroom, I still have no noise reduction on, but okay, here's what we got here in Lightroom. And this craziness is what we have going on in DXO. Now I did find if I go over and I turn on denoising, and let's just go standard for now. Let's not do the fancy ones. So it comes back and it kind of denoises this. And so you're like, oh, good. It's just like, you know, a noise artifact that the processing's getting rid of. The problem is, look at this. It's not. We've lost. It's just turned. The algorithm has seen that there's a bunch of noise here and it's removed it, but it's just turned all of this to complete paste. Look at the difference in Lightroom versus here. This is unusable. I mean, this is not a professional edit in any way, shape, or form. Look at the difference in these life jackets and the way that just a few adjustments to HSL and shadows and things like that. I mean, I can turn my HSL off. I can't use HSL either. Now, I know this is a fairly extreme lighting situation. It's not going to be all that extreme. Some of these portraits we were looking at, I had HSL on and it's working. People will sometimes say, Gavin, you're an Adobe shield. No, Adobe like stopped talking to me a long time ago. I want there to be competition, and I've been an advocate for this really strongly all the way back to like the original Pro Photo Show days in like the 2010s. Like this goes way back that I've been talking about this stuff. But these alternative apps, if they want to be pricing as professional apps and taken seriously by professionals, the professional tools have to work. Color grading and split toning isn't an add-on. HSL that's functional is not a luxury. Maybe smart collections are a luxury. I shoot lots of images in extreme light all the time. Like, I love images in extreme light. It has to be able to handle those as a processor. So the processing engine in Photo Lab 9 is still fundamentally flawed. In fact, in the review I did last year, I looked at this in Lightroom and in Capture One and in other apps like Neo, where it fell apart even worse and just couldn't even handle the highlights. And there's some interesting tests. That's why I always come back to this image, because I know it's a bit of a tough one. But DXO, you got to fix your processing engine. And please, DXO, don't just get irritated. I'm not here to hate on you guys. I'm doing a torture test on this because we don't have a partnership. I'm not sponsored. My job on this channel is to do real reviews, and I want there to be good competition. Like, let's talk. I want the game to come up. Okay, but let's talk about noise, because DXA is pretty famous for their noise algorithms, and let's compare Lightroom's noise to DXO noise. Now, here's a test file I've used before. This is an ISO 3200 from a Fuji. We'll use this, and then we'll also take a Nikon file so we can look at both. This is way underexposed, so I have to bring this up like 2 stops. Now we have a lot of noise on this. Okay, let's take that same file in DXO and give it 2 stops of increased exposure. So the rendering is a little different here, but our brightness and all that is pretty good. Okay, so we're in DXO. To start with, let's turn on just standard luminance denoise. So we're gonna turn on a basic denoise here. Let's bring it into 1:1, and let's bring the Lightroom into 1:1, and let's go down and see what we have here. I've done no noise reduction on this yet, other than just the default color noise. Let's do a little bit of luminance noise. And you can see here's our Lightroom, and here is our DXO. Now, I think in this case, there's probably a little bit more noise in the DXO than in the Lightroom. But in an image this noisy, that's not really what we would use. So let's turn off luminance denoise. Let's turn on the AI denoise, which takes, what, about 6, 7, 8, 10 seconds in Lightroom. Okay, here's the advanced noise from Lightroom, which doesn't have to make a DNG copy now. It can just be applied right on the image, and you can see it cleaned this up a lot. This is at about 50%. Let's go back to Photo Lab, and we now have Deep Prime XD3 X-Trans, because this is a Fuji file. So let's run that one then, and its default looks like it's going to be about 40. Okay, so unlike previous versions, we can render and preview this right in the window, and it's very clean. It's a little more pasty than the Lightroom version, and I've always found this to be the case where there's still a little bit more kind of natural grain. Now, I could turn the Lightroom version up, Or I don't actually like the pasty softness. I'm going to turn this down to say 30 or so. And so we start getting just a little bit of that natural grain. Should we turn on lens sharpness optimization to make it a little sharper? Because it feels a little bit soft. Okay, now I feel like the sharpness is kind of right in there with Lightroom. This is our DXO, and this is our Lightroom. Now I could turn this up a little in Lightroom if I wanted to compare them. They're both doing a great job here. This is DXO, and I've turned it down a little bit to bring in a little bit more of that natural grain, but you can see in the texture of the blouse, the hair. I also turned on lens sharpness optimization in this case because the default output seemed a little bit soft to me. If you look at the granules of hair up here, they're both doing a really good job. I think the algorithm's a little more intense in DXO than right here in Lightroom that we're looking at now. Okay, so people talk about Fuji files because there's this idea that Fuji files are some special thing because of their X-Trans sensor and they don't work good in Lightroom and stuff. We've proved that wrong with modern versions of Lightroom, Capture One, all these apps over and over again on this channel. The output isn't that different. Okay, but let's look at another image. Let's take one that's a high ISO Nikon file. Okay, here I have it in Lightroom, and I'm gonna go ahead and reset this. I have like a Portra 800 preset on here. I'm gonna reset this to the raw file out of a Nikon Z. Okay, so here we are in DXO with this ISO 36,000 from a Nikon full frame, and here we are in Lightroom. Lightroom is putting on some color noise reduction by default. Let's turn on denoising in here. So even that basic color denoise is not on by default. Now this is standard denoising. So basically luminance denoising in DXO. Let's go do, again, some luminance denoising of 30 or 40 in Lightroom. And I would say they're close. If you look down here, there's still a little more color in the DXO one, but again, this is just processing. We could easily turn up the saturation on the Lightroom version a little bit. Okay, now in DXO, let's go to Deep Prime XD/XD2S. Now again, I think this looks a little bit pasty. I actually tend to like the Deep Prime 3 a little better in DXO. As you can see here, it says ultimate quality and extra details. I don't really like my images being extra detailed with AI. I want my image. Let's switch this to Deep Prime 3. Okay, so here's Deep Prime 3, and to my eye, this does seem a little more natural. Okay, so we've turned on denoise in Lightroom. That automatically takes away luminance reduction, which we could add some of back in, but by default, it puts it back to 0. And in Lightroom, you can turn it up and down, but you don't have these different modes and options. But here is our close-up here in Lightroom, and here's our close-up here in DXO. And you can kind of look at the background, the hair, back to Lightroom, very, very close. I would put something like a film preset on this, which would actually add a little bit more grain back in, but in a natural grain sort of way. This is a Portra 800, so it's a fairly strong grain, but I might also do something that was more subtle, like a 160. I like adding a little bit of grain back in. I think we're way too paranoid about taking away all the noise, and it tends to make our images pasty. That said, I think Lightroom and DXO noise reduction tools are pretty much equal. DXO does have the advantage of having a few more options available, but Lightroom, while it has less options, just kind of seems to work all the time. So now DXO is also pretty known for its lens corrections, and we won't get too deep into that today. Although Lightroom lens corrections over the years have also gotten really good. So when it comes to chromatic aberration and vignetting and things like that, I think both of these are perfectly suitable. So the basic features are there in both, but how they work and how much you can do and the little details are very different. And there's a lot of things missing, not just folder drill down or smart collections, but basic things. Like in Lightroom, I can press the C key and I can compare two images side by side. I can zoom into those images. This is something I use all the time. In DXO, I can still find no way to do this. You click the compare button and it just basically compares before and after of your edits on the image you're looking at. But that's rarely the compare I need. I need to compare two different images side by side. So what's my conclusion for DXO9 versus Lightroom today in 2025? Well, honestly, it's not even close. No one that uses Lightroom or Capture One is going to want to downgrade to this. That's not even a cheaper option. So overall, yes, we have the features. We have the ability to browse. without a catalog, even though there's sometimes some weirdness going on with loading the thumbnails. We have really limited projects. We have no way to compare images. We have no folder drill down. We do have pretty functional tools in terms of developing. The masking seems to be working pretty decently. It's also worth mentioning in Lightroom that you get other stuff though. You get the book module, you get the print module, which I actually print from all the time. And you have other things like slideshows and web modules and things like that that can be very useful. Lightroom also has online and mobile apps that are really good and that can all talk to each other and synchronize images between them. And in this area, Lightroom not only has a huge advantage over DxO, but over Capture One as well. But more importantly, I would never switch to DxO as a primary editor at this point because the processing engine is not good enough. Sure, some images are going to look just great, but when you get into detailed things like HSL, and this can be a little bit difficult because where you tend to get artifacts and images and where colors meet and things like that is in things like adjusting hue and saturation and luminance of individual channels. I even have to be careful about this with point color in Lightroom, and when I'm designing presets in Lightroom and Capture One, I do a lot of testing and adjusting to make sure all those colors meld together. But in DxO, it's just completely falling apart. And we need DxO to really dig into the processing engine and fix these major and obvious flaws that literally take me seconds to uncover. When I see that happening, I'm going to be excited because I think that with some improvement, if DxO starts taking professionals seriously, instead of just relying on paying Schill Tubers to say it's a Lightroom killer when it's obviously not a Lightroom killer in any way, if they would put their energy into improving the app, I think there's potential here. And if they were to fix these things, I would be the first to be saying, hey, this is a great alternative to Lightroom that you don't have to pay a subscription for. So that's my thoughts on DXO Photo Lab 9 here at the end of 2025. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you found this video useful and interesting. I know we didn't cover every single feature in both these apps. That would take way too long. But what I did cover is things that I know with 25 years experience as a photographer that professionals are going to need on a constant basis. And DxO has a ways to go on that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I'll also put some links to other videos, free presets, things like that in the description that you can check out. And we'll see you next time. Peace.